I am sitting in the Peak District, just on the border between Staffordshire and Derbyshire, and I can tell you it's very lovely. I'm here with the lovely Julia, who is just behind the camera, and we're staying in this sort of shepherd's hut affair, overlooking some rather beautiful Peak District landscape. All green, all grass fed, lots of trees on the horizon and all of that. It just is idyllic. And listen, I don't know if you can hear it, but there's sheep, there's some bird song. You cannot hear the road, you cannot hear the ambulances, you cannot hear all the noise around, and it's absolutely amazing. 360-degree view. I can't really show you because I didn't bring all the technical editing equipment to be able to put all the stuff in, so this is just a one take. I've been reading, actually, Julia, do you mind going and getting the book from the van, or from the shepherd's hut? We've been reading to each other a book by A.G. Street, written in 1931, called Farmer's Glory. And funnily enough, we've just pretty much finished it now. Here she comes. Thank you, my dear. Farmer's Glory. And it's an amazing book because it's a snapshot of farming back in the sort of, he starts talking about it from the sort of 1910 to the 1920s, and then he rounds it up in the 1930s, looking ahead at what will go on. And I've got a number of other of his books which I'm fascinated in reading. And the reason I mention that, of course, is we are looking at the food and farming at the moment, and I want to concentrate on some of this because I feel that we are in a crisis. Like so much at the moment that's going on, it's a silent war. We can't see bombs dropping down, but we know that we are being crushed by our government, crushed by our councils, crushed by the police, crushed by society, the courts, and various things. And some of us are aware of this, but I think most of us, if not all of us, are feeling this pinch and this crushing of society. And yet here we are in the 21st century, in which we are supposedly at the peak of, in the Peak District, the peak of our intelligence, civilization, the ability to look after ourselves better than ever before. And yet you look around at the countries, look around at the towns and the villages, and you'll see everything's in a bit of a sorrowful state. How is that possible? How is it possible the government is as corrupt and as bankrupt as it is, and is dishing out all the money that we pay in our taxes, that we're forced to in pretty much everything that we buy, and giving it away to everybody else other than the people who are contributing? I mean, it is a complete madness situation. And food is the thing that we take for granted. And I think this is interesting because 100 years ago, A.G. Street was writing, and he was saying back then that actually farmers were the people that most people didn't really think about, didn't care about, just thought that they were a strange bunch in the country, didn't really consider much about where their food came from. And look at us now. If he had seen the changes that have happened to where food has gone from being provided by farms in the countryside and given to towns, at least it was real food. Now, of course, we've seen how we are all eating, I say all, but not all of us, are eating highly processed foods with much of the nutrition taken out, and it's indoctrinated, if that's the right word, or it's impregnated with all sorts of other chemicals to make it last longer. We know all of that. We know those arguments, and we know that the supermarkets are very much the ones that are pushing the prices down so that farmers can barely afford to produce food anyway. But A.G. Street was, at the end of his book, in the epilogue, after telling us his life story and how his farm changed and developed, and he'd gone from growing wheat and corn and the romance of that with horses and then tractors, of ploughing, of planting, drilling, of harrowing and of harvesting, of building corn ricks and then the big, what do you call those, haystacks, those sort of things, and all of that, and how you had the men, and it was a way of life rather than a business that was looking at profit. He could see that that was all changing because we had imports coming in from all sorts of different places across the world. And of course, we've seen that escalate more and more. Only during the war did we suddenly realise, oh my goodness, we're on our own here. We've got to grow our own. And so we became as self-sufficient as we could possibly be. And then after the Second World War, we seem to have imported grain, particularly from all sorts of places, America, of course, and Ukraine being two of the major places, and it reduced what we could make for ourselves. And he talks in 1931 how we basically cannot grow the right kind of wheat anymore. Our climate, particularly, even then, it wasn't being manipulated by the geoengineering that we know and can see. It's so obvious that it's going on. And although we've had improvements in the types of grain that we now plant and the machinery and the big agricultural stuff, and we do see in places like East Anglia where it's relatively flat and they can manage to do it, we've seen that actually places like here, it's all grass. And what is interesting to me, as an aeroplane flies overhead, what is interesting to me, probably spraying the skies even more or trying to drown out the message, is that he talked about what we should be doing perhaps across the whole country is more grass farming. Now, I'm not saying we eat the grass, it's saying we farm animals who eat the grass, they graze, and it's all about meat. The one thing we know at the moment is in Agenda 2130 is the WEF is, with their great myth that it's all man-made global warming that's causing the planet to fall apart. And of course the planet isn't falling apart. The planet's only falling apart because we're poisoning it with all our pollution. If we'd stop polluting the bloody place, perhaps it's nothing to do with CO2, but that's, as we know, how they do it. But they want us, and they're blaming animals and meat eaters. They want us to get rid of animals and have plant-based foods. We need the plant-based foods to feed the animals. That bit I go along with, because we do need to eat meat. We're learning more and more how important meat actually is for us. And reading the epilogue with Julia earlier this afternoon, I could not agree more that is exactly what we should be doing, is that we should be growing more animals, not less. We should be eating more meat, not less. Now, I know there'll be vegans and vegetarians who disagree with it, and I absolutely understand that, and, that's fine. Everyone's got their own choice. But meat has huge benefits if it's proper, grass-fed, not polluted grass with all these pesticides and things. It's so much better for our health. And you can argue whichever way you like, but and this is my opinion, we're all entitled to our opinion. And I think this is very, very important going forward. And talking to some of the farmers that we've spoken to, again, John Cook down there at Dora's Dairy, milking his 60 cows in the same way, with the same equipment, basically, that AJ Street was doing outdoor milking in the field, with the animals in the field, manuring the grass, keeping it healthy. And he's saying basically, there'll be some arable growing, but what you're growing is animal feed, whether that's, what is it they eat? Turnips and things like that. And you're growing and grass and hay for your animals, but the animals are keeping the the soil, the most important aspect of farming, enriched with all the natural fertilizer that it has, rather than these nitrates, these artificial nitrates and things. And so you don't have runoff and pollutants and things. And that seems to me to make a lot of sense, that we need much more of that. Now, I'm not a farmer, and so what do I know? But I know that what we're doing is not right, and I know that I need to learn a lot more, and that we all need to start thinking about where our food comes from and what kind of food we need. Yes, we need vegetables, so we need a lot more market gardens. We need more smaller farms, I think. Smaller farms providing locally places. I've said this before, obviously. And it's fascinating, though, that in the 1930s, I think A.J. Street was onto something. And finally, I just want to say this. He said two things in a different book. He said this is two things that should affect farming. One, farmers and people should farm but respect the landscape first, not people. So in other words, you should not damage or destroy the landscape. He was very certain about that. And we've seen how the landscape has been destroyed with pesticides, with all those herbicides and poisons, and also by building on good farmland. We've seen that with new builds all over the place. He would be spinning, I would imagine, in his grave if he could see that. The second thing he said was farmers should not have any special treatment, as in, say, subsidies. He thought they should not be charities. If they were entitled to have subsidies, then every business should have subsidies. Don't make farmers appear like the poor man, that they are then just the charity and they need to have that. Either farmers stand level pegging with everybody else, or everybody gets the same dole, as it were, as he called it. And I think that made a lot of sense, because we've seen how farmers have become reliant now on the handout from the government, instead of being resilient and finding ways to support themselves. And I think that's been where the supermarkets have managed to take over and call the shots. And we now need people to boycott these supermarkets who are causing problems to the farmers, and we need farmers to stand back up. And as he was experimenting with back 100 years ago in retail, of selling his product, milk, good quality fresh milk, and it was before pasteurization, straight to the public. And he was making a go of it. And I think that's where we've got to get back. People buying straight from the farm, cut out the middlemen, cut out this chase to the bottom, eat quality food which does us best. So, from the Peak District up here on a overcast evening, thank you for watching, and I'm hoping to get this up the following day. But thank you for watching, and I will be back hopefully at home in the studio, where we're going to see somebody about beefed cattle tomorrow. So hopefully that will be out on the channel. Thank you for watching.